So here we've got Mr. Skeleton from Home Depot, and now I've taken him apart in the middle so I can move him apart. These are 8-foot length sticks, and I think I'm going to go with that. Going to make it 2 feet wide. Going to put a strong piece at the one end, strong piece at the other, and then just use the thinner pieces to make a kind of bed for him to lie on. At the bottom we'll have his ankles tied underneath a bar, and then the top end will be something which stretches him. Let's get chopping. So the basic frame's complete. Eagle-eyed ones may notice that one piece of wood had to change due to the fact that Home Depot's wood is total garbage. It's very twisted. So next thing to work out, with this cross brace in place, how far to put what is effectively going to be his foot clamp. I don't want them all the way down because I'm going to pivot this thing up and I don't want them on the floor. So I think probably making that aligned with that bottom one, and then I can have a bar go across which will clamp his little legs like that. So the initial idea here was basically just put slats all the way up there, have his feet contained. I'm going to pull his arms up and stretch him, probably pull him apart, I don't know, 6 inches or so. And but the problem with the slats, I think, at least in the body part, is I think they may be quite a lot of resistance when you start trying to move them. So rather than have these slats, I think we maybe need to do some wider boards around that center section so that he can slide more easily. And for that, I'm going to use some really simple fence panels. They're cheap to buy, similar thickness to the other stuff, and much wider. So we're just going to use a couple of offcuts of wood as spacers, which are these 5.5 inch. Just we're going to go along and just use this basic nail gun just to secure them. Tip: don't buy one of these. Here's all the slats nailed in place. Next thing to work on is actually how to stand it up. So next stage is just to put some legs on the thing, get the thing up at an angle. Got a couple of pieces of wood, these are 4 foot, and we're going to mount them on here, a couple of bolts through. I've gone 46 inch up, 1 in. I don't want it all the way to the edge. I want to be able to actually swing this thing around and pivot it, and I can choose which angle I put the thing in the end. So I'm just going to drill clearance holes in here and then smaller holes in here that I can screw into. Very simple stuff. You could do it with lag bolts if you had any laying around, but I don't. So one thing is I don't really want the bolts sticking out, so what I've done, found that the bolt fits in an 11mm socket. So I'm going to drill an oversized hole round, dig down some of the wood out, and then I can get the hole sitting down a bit more flush. This will then go into the other wood just that little bit further. So I've just drilled down a little way with a hole saw here. Doesn't have to go too far. Then I've just got a chisel. This is pretty sharp. Just going to break out this middle section. And we should end up with something that's vaguely flat. Again, you're not trying to build a piece of furniture for your living room. This is a quick and easy thing for a Halloween project. There you go. Got that dug out. Going to drill this hole a little bit more, but then the screw will fit in there a bit more flush. So here's one of the screws in place. Folds all the way back. We'll fold all the way down, still clears this wooden piece, so I can have it any angle I want. So time to just turn it over, do the other side. Okay, so we've got the thing up the other way. One thing we're going to do is put a cross piece along here. Width-wise, I want it a bit wider than these. These are 26, so I'm going to do like 28. Put a piece across the top, and then that will allow it to be easier to stand upright. So here we are, things back up. I think that's probably a pretty good angle. You could probably change it pretty easily. Just move it back, lay it down more, push it up, make it more vertical. So next thing to do is just tie the bottom to the top so it can't accidentally fall down. Loads of ways of doing it. We're just going to put a straight piece of wood, I think, for now, with a little bracket that can be disconnected. So we've got the stay across. This end, just done something which I think is probably temporary. Had a little bracket, don't even know where it came from. Cut a little slot in the thing. Now you can kind of push it over there, which is quite difficult, one hand holding a phone, and it will just clamp up, stop it moving. Probably make something a bit stronger than that. But I'm really eager to see how to get the mechanism working to actually lift the skeleton up there. Couldn't wait to see what he would look like, just strung up a bit. So he's got his feet down with a bar. We'll make that look a bit prettier later on. And clamp it tight. Up here, we have to loosen a screw at the back just to make his shoulder joint move a little bit further. And now he's pretty square. And for now, I've just got him hoisted up at the top with a couple of ropes. So the next bit. So I wanted a manual sort of handle for this thing. This is a simple plate that I made. It's got a stud in the middle. It's going to glue into the other piece. And just some bits of 1/2 inch PVC. I'm going to block up the ends. Going to try and make it look a bit more, I don't know, wood or metal, I guess. So I've given the black pipe a coat of a dark brown stain. Name is Varda from IKEA, and kind of does look like wood a bit, maybe. I've also undercoated the other things, and the manual handle I've given basically a black coat to start with, and then I've kind of dry brushed silver to try and make it look like metal. Okay, so I've sprayed up the two end plates silvery colour. I was going to go something fancy, but you don't actually get to see them once they're installed much. These are just shaved down, ready to go. I'm not even going to paint these two end points. My PVC log, I think don't look too bad. Some different colours in there. Basically did a bit of a dry brush with a reddy green brown colour. You see streaks of it. So now I'm just going to hot glue these things together into the ends. I could put some screws in to get into here if I really need to. I think hot glue on here is probably going to do enough. So here we are, got both our end plates inside our cylinder, and this is going to live here in between these two rails. A little bit of play, just a tiny amount actually, about maybe 4 millimeters or so. You can see that hopefully you can see, the width of this rail is approximately the same as this section here, and the same the other end. The idea is they're going to spin in these plumbing pipe brackets. Can go on here, on each side. The thing will rotate in those, put a bit of grease in them. This end will be the one where we put the fake hand turner. This one's where we're actually going to put a motor arrangement, and we're going to actually turn it with a motor. So next thing to do, put this thing back a little bit, give it a little bit of space, put it square. The chains or ropes will come over the top. There's room for them to get round here. They don't need to move very far. It's a 6-inch cylinder, so what's our diameter? 2 pi r's, about 18 inches circumference. We only need to move them about a foot, so it's going to go around about, what, 3/4 of a revolution. So laying them out, looks like I don't need very long chains here to get these on. I want this somewhere around the start of the drum, so that as it pulls, the chain just wraps gently around the drum. I'm only aiming to move them about a foot, maybe even less. But the one thing I noticed, as soon as you put this on, there's obviously a gap under here. So I'm going to have to try and bend this piece of metal so it curves around the drum more and keeps this square on the roller. So I'll just put that in my metal vise to do that. So I bent the bracket to suit, and I pulled it in about somewhere around 1/2 inch. That'd be enough for the chain to clear. I'm lining it up to the center, and then I'm going to screw them both in. Here he is strung up. You can see the rollers holding him. I'll probably have to reinforce it with fishing line, but then you can see as the roller rotates, which is hard to do while holding a phone, up he goes. So on the frame, the next thing we did is basically just sand off any rough edges. Try and sand this center section where it's going to slide on to be a bit smoother. Just basically used a palm sander for that bit, and then an angle grinder with a sanding disc to make light work of all the edges. Just basically try and rough them up a bit, but also smooth them off to make it look like they're worn a bit more.
So if you just want to build a manual rack, this is just about done. Put a coat of paint on it or varnish and it's complete as is. It's going to look good standing out there. But I wanted something that would actually move, so the next part of the video is basically all about making it move. Having a quick look at the cost of the thing to build. The manual rack, if you've already got a skeleton laying around, the cost is about $23 in today's cash. That's just buying stuff from Home Depot. If you've got to buy a skeleton, you're going to add in $40, but it's still pretty cheap for what you're getting.
Okay, so we've got the roller back in position and a nice brown frame. Now the idea is as we turn this, the roller moves, only has to move about 1/2 revolution. I want to use one of these little motors like this for this. This is the wrong type of cog, but basically we're going to make a bracket, picks up this shaft, comes across here, holds the motor on the back that will then drive this round. That way I can hide the whole thing then in a small wooden box. You won't be able to see the mechanism, and I think that'll look quite neat and easy to hide. So here he is back together, and I put the servo up high, and this enables me to get a big range of movements.
So the guts of the controller are based around a homemade Arduino controlled unit. This allows sequencing of the different parts of the unit as well as being triggered by a PIR.
So we have all the different parts connected to the board now. We've got a power supply coming in, 12-volt power supply in. We've got a light. This is one of my low voltage spotlights that I built last year. We've got a servo, any old servo, just to show us the motion. A PIR sensor to trigger the thing. And a speaker. If you're thinking, wow, that speaker's pretty big, got to be a bit careful with these little DFplayers. They're really only supposed to drive 8 ohms or more. So my normal speaker I've been trying to use is this guy, but it's only a 4 ohm. So if you put music or something on really loud, it tends to actually make the DFplayer crash. Presumably it draws too much current and boom, drops out. All connected on the board. Got a little 3D printed box as well. Very simple. It's got some little cutouts around the edges just for cables to lay flat. Fits inside. It's actually got some holes here for screws if you want to screw it in. All the cables then go through the little holes. Make it neat and tidy, and then there's a basic lid which is just a push fit on top of the thing once it's all completed. It's all made of PLA, this stuff, so it's not going to be particularly good for exposure to UV and stuff, so give it a coat of even clear satin varnish. Spray paint will help with that, or you can paint it or just hide it. I'm going to hide it under a piece of wood. If you've looked at the video with the coding, I went through the basics of how it works. Gets triggered off this guy, then it will turn the light on, it will start to move the servo, and it will play an audio track which is stored on a micro SD card in here. All pretty simple stuff, but a good introduction to what you can do with a little Arduino Nano and make your props come alive for very little money indeed. So the next stage is to put this box up on our actual unit and test it out in real life. Okay, so we've got the servo connected. Actually went for a metal servo arm. Makes it much stiffer. Still got a piece of hardwood doing the pulling of the thing. All the electronics in a box. Speaker, I'm not sure what I'm going to do with it at the moment. I think rather than putting the lid on here, I could just put a piece of wood over the top, put a speaker underneath it. So time for a real try. So while testing the rack, I realized that there was still really too much friction for these 3D printed pegs. And what happened was, as the thing put its weight down on them, they wouldn't stick out straight, they'd come out at an angle, which is easy to show on this one. And then the thing would go around in sort of almost elliptical path and would give too much resistance. So rather than doing this, I've got rid of these, and I found an old umbrella pole, which is almost exactly the right diameter to fit in the square hole. So it will go all the way through one solid metal rod and then be supported each end. Should be way lower friction. So I'm going to cut a piece down and try it. So what I ended up doing with the electronics, simply putting an offcut of board above the top just to protect it a little, and then mount the speaker just with a couple of screws. You can see some screw heads sticking up. I'm going to cut those off with a grinder so I can't accidentally cut myself, but it's pretty compact, pretty good. And since moving to the metal path, you can see there's actually huge amounts of easy movement there. Here we've got the guy pretty much together. Gonna just trigger it. See the lights coming on. Use any lights we want there. And you can see the thing starts to inch upwards.
So to put one of these controllers together, if you're buying all the pieces from AliExpress or somewhere like that, they're really quite cheap. You know, you can buy even an Arduino there, $2.50. So the total cost of the thing's about 22 bucks, and $12 of that is a strong servo. Then you're going to need a printed box or some form of box, wire and solder and the usual bits and pieces. I'm going to have a separate video on the controller side of these things.